Dr. Elena Vasquez thought she was dealing with just another arrogant official until federal judge Marcus Chen calmly showed him the credentials that would turn his world upside down in front of an entire hospital. Marcus Chen never liked to be late. That morning, he'd slipped on a charcoal suit over a crisp white shirt, tucked his judicial robe into his leather messenger bag, and grabbed a quick espresso from a corner cafe in Lakewood, Colorado. He preferred anonymity when he wasn't behind the bench, no flashy car, no driver, no security detail trailing him like some of his colleagues insisted on. Just him and his modest electric Hyundai humming quietly along the streets toward the federal courthouse. He was halfway down Alameda Avenue when he noticed the police SUV lurking 3 cars behind him. He didn't think much of it. He signaled his turn, carefully checked his mirror-sold habits from his days as a public defender, but the lights flashed anyway. Marcus slowed, pulled over neatly by a bustling hospital entrance, and placed his hands firmly at 10 and 2 on the steering wheel. Through the mirror, he caught a glimpse of the officer, young, broad-shouldered, with a military-style haircut, moving with aggressive purpose toward his car. Marcus exhaled slowly. The door yanked open before he could even roll down the window. "You think the rules don't apply to you?" Officer Derek Sullivan barked, already glaring. Marcus kept his voice measured. "Good morning, officer. May I ask why I'm being pulled over? Would you like to see my license and registration?" Sullivan snapped, ignoring his question. His hand hovered uncomfortably close to his holster. Marcus started reaching for his wallet slowly, narrating his movements. "I'm reaching into my jacket pocket, officer." But something about his calm demeanor seemed to infuriate the officer further. "Don't move so damn slow. You think this is a game?" he said, leaning in closer to the window. His breath smelled like energy drinks and hostility. Marcus suppressed his growing unease. "I'm cooperating fully, sir. Here's my—" Before he could finish, Sullivan grabbed the door handle and yanked it wider. Marcus flinched instinctively, gripping the seat. "Get out of the vehicle now!" he shouted. Marcus didn't argue. He unbuckled, stepping out with deliberate, careful movements. The moment his feet touched the pavement, the blow came a sharp, vicious punch to his stomach that doubled him over, gasping for air. Shocked exclamations erupted from the bystanders, nearby hospital staff on break, patients waiting for rides, visitors heading in with flowers and gift bags. Marcus struggled to straighten up, his glasses askew, his briefcase tumbling to the ground. For a moment, the world tilted. Sullivan stood there, hands still clenched, looking more satisfied than concerned at what he'd just done. Marcus steadied himself against the car, fighting to regain his breath. He resisted the urge to clutch his abdomen. "You just assaulted a federal judge," he said quietly. It wasn't a threat. It was a statement of fact, like noting the color of the sky. Sullivan scoffed, taking a half step back. "Yeah, right." A nurse nearby dropped her coffee. A security guard by the hospital entrance muttered something into his radio. Phones were emerging from pockets and purses, shaky fingers fumbling to hit record. Marcus reached carefully into his messenger bag. Slowly, he pulled out a leather credential wallet that displayed his federal judicial ID and badge. The emblem of the United States District Court gleamed under the Colorado sun. The color drained from Sullivan's face faster than an hourglass emptying. Marcus didn't say a word. He didn't have to. All around the energy shifted. Angry murmurs grew louder. A doctor was already on his phone to 911, though they were less than 6 blocks from the police station. "You're finished!" someone shouted from the crowd. But Marcus kept his eyes locked on Sullivan, steady and calm. Even though his stomach throbbed with pain and his heart hammered against his ribs, he knew better than to show weakness now. He wasn't just protecting himself anymore. He was standing for every person who never had credentials to shield them. But the tension was only beginning to rise, and the next few minutes would make the scene explode even bigger than anyone standing there could imagine. Officer Sullivan's hand twitched near his holster. For one sickening second, Marcus thought he might try to arrest him anyway, maybe even draw his weapon. But something about the way the crowd pressed closer, phones raised like shields, made him hesitate. "Put those away!" Sullivan barked at 2 residents filming from near the ambulance bay. His voice cracked. Neither moved an inch. Neither did anyone else. Marcus stood his ground. His voice was low but carried like thunder. "You assaulted me in front of dozens of witnesses. There will be consequences." Sullivan's mouth opened, then closed. His chest heaved like he couldn't get enough air. He took a stumbling step backward. An older woman in scrubs, her silver hair pulled back in a tight bun, called out, "You better call your supervisor, officer! You've made a terrible mistake!" Marcus watched Sullivan's fingers tremble slightly. He almost pitied him, almost. The officer fumbled for his radio, requesting immediate backup. He barked into the mic, "Possible disturbance at Lakewood Memorial, main entrance." He didn't mention that he was the cause of it. Marcus straightened his tie and jacket, credentials still visible. His abdomen was throbbing harder now, a deep ache spreading through his core, but he kept his voice even. "You know who I am," he said. "You know what happens next." Sullivan shook his head slightly, as if trying to physically shake off reality. "I didn't know," he muttered. You don't look like a judge." The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. Marcus didn't flinch. He didn't need to. The crowd around him heard it too, and their outrage started to simmer, boiling under the surface. A resident physician stepped closer. "What exactly is a judge supposed to look like, huh?" she called out sharply. Sullivan ignored her, pacing in a tight circle, his face blotchy and red. He didn't apologize. He didn't offer help. He just looked trapped. The first patrol car screeched up seconds later. 2 officers hopped out, 1 black woman, 1 white man, hands hovering near their hips, eyes widening when they saw the scene. Marcus spoke first. He didn't shout. He didn't plead. He spoke like a judge. Clear, deliberate, and commanding. "Officer Sullivan assaulted me during an unexplained traffic stop. You are now witnesses to that fact. My name is Judge Marcus Chen, United States District Court." The male officer blinked twice, processing the words. His partner stiffened visibly, glancing at Sullivan like he was radioactive. "Are you serious?" she asked, eyes narrowing. Marcus simply held up his credentials higher, letting the sunlight catch the federal seal. Another car pulled up, then another. Sirens in the distance, loud and urgent, not the kind meant for fender benders. The hospital's head of security came running out, shouting, "We have surveillance footage. Everything's recorded." Sullivan's shoulders slumped like the weight of the entire city just landed on them. Marcus watched him, waiting. He wanted to see if Sullivan would own it, if he would apologize, if he would try to right even a fraction of what he had broken. He didn't. Instead, he looked away like a child caught in a lie, muttering silent curses to himself. The other officers moved in, separating him from Marcus, corralling the crowd, trying to get a handle on a situation that was already far beyond their control. Someone from dispatch squawked over the radio. "Captain Rivera is en route. ETA 4 minutes." Marcus caught the sideways glances the responding officers were giving him. Half sympathy, half fear. They knew this wasn't going to stay local, not with half the hospital holding phones. Not with security footage from multiple angles. The female officer, her nameplate reading Washington, approached cautiously. "Sir, do you need medical attention?" she asked. Marcus nodded once. "He struck me in the abdomen." Officer Washington looked like she wanted to disappear. "Let's get you inside to the ER, she said. "We'll handle this properly." Marcus held her gaze. "I'll wait until Captain Rivera arrives." His tone left no room for argument, and so they waited. But when Captain Rivera arrived minutes later, the storm that hit Lakewood, Colorado, made everything that had already happened look minor in comparison. A black SUV with government plates tore into the hospital roundabout, scattering pigeons into the air. The doors swung open almost before the tires stopped rolling. Captain Sofia Rivera stepped out, her face set in stone. Rivera was not a woman who suffered fools. Sharp eyes, dark hair pulled back in a severe bun, a presence that commanded attention without raising her voice. She spotted Marcus first, her whole body tensed. She pushed through the circle of officers like a woman on a mission. "Judge Chen," she said, voice low and clipped. "Are you all right, sir?" Marcus didn't nod. He didn't smile. He simply lifted his suit jacket slightly, revealing the already forming bruise on his abdomen. The silence that followed was suffocating. Rivera's jaw twitched once, then she turned to Derek Sullivan, who was standing awkwardly by his SUV, trying to avoid eye contact with anyone. "What the hell happened here?" Rivera asked, voice controlled. "Dangerous." Sullivan opened his mouth, but Marcus beat him to it. This officer pulled me over without explanation, demanded I exit my vehicle without stating the reason for the stop, then struck me in the abdomen, he said evenly, all before verifying my identity or credentials. Someone's phone chimed nearby, a text probably, or a recording notification. The bystanders weren't moving. They weren't missing a second of this. Rivera turned fully to Sullivan now. "You struck him?" she asked, voice low like a rumble before an avalanche. Sullivan swallowed. I didn't know who he was." Rivera took one slow step closer. "And that would make it acceptable?" Sullivan opened his mouth again, floundering, but nothing coherent came out. Marcus's voice cut clean through the air. "My position doesn't excuse what you did. It just makes it impossible for you to pretend it didn't happen," the crowd murmured. Officer Washington looked like she was ready to resign on the spot. Rivera looked around, taking in the faces, the phones, the security cameras mounted on the hospital's entrance. She closed the gap to Sullivan in 3 precise steps. "Hand over your weapon and badge right now." There it was, the first crack in Sullivan's facade. He blinked, stunned. "Captain, you can't be serious." Rivera didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. "You assaulted a federal judge, Derek. You're lucky I'm not putting you in handcuffs this instant." Reluctantly, Sullivan unclipped his badge, then slowly handed over his sidearm. His hands were shaking. Marcus stood still, watching him. Not with vengeance, not with satisfaction, but with disappointment, the kind that cuts deeper than anger ever could. Officer Washington quietly stepped up and took Sullivan by the arm, leading him toward a second cruiser with an open door. Sullivan didn't fight. He didn't look back. As soon as he was out of earshot, Rivera turned to Marcus again. "Sir, let's get you inside for medical attention. I'm deeply sorry for what happened." "This will be handled properly." Marcus nodded once. "See that it is." His voice cracked just a little on the last word, but he masked it quickly. The head of security, a former military man with a buzz cut and steady hands, approached them. "Judge Chen," he said respectfully, "we have the entire incident on multiple cameras. The footage is being secured as we speak." Marcus turned to him, grateful for the professionalism. "Thank you," he said, meaning it. "The truth needs to be preserved." The security chief nodded firmly. "No one's going to be able to spin this, sir." The emergency room staff cleared a path as Marcus entered, Captain Rivera at his side. A trauma surgeon, Dr. Amara Okafor, took one look at Marcus's face and gestured to a private examination room. Marcus let her examine the bruising not because he needed the immediate treatment, but because he understood the importance of documenting everything properly. As Dr. Okafor worked, a low buzz of conversation filled the air outside the room. More police arrived. Hospital administrators in suits rushed down from their offices. Phones rang incessantly at the nurses' station. Marcus realized with a strange detachment. The conversation about what had just happened wasn't going to be quiet. The firestorm that was building would not just change Officer Sullivan's life. It would pull Marcus into a much bigger fight than he ever asked for. But there was something else happening, too. Something unexpected. As Dr. Okafor finished her examination, she paused, her hand resting lightly on Marcus's shoulder. "My brother was wrongfully arrested last year," she said quietly. "No one believed him when he said the officer used excessive force. No one." Her eyes met his, fierce and determined. "But they'll believe you." Marcus nodded slowly, the weight of her words settling over him like a mantle. "This wasn't just about one officer's mistake anymore. This was about something much larger, much more important." And somehow, without seeking it, Marcus Chen had become its reluctant champion. It didn't take long for the videos to spread. By the time Marcus finished giving his official statement at the police station, his phone was lighting up with missed calls and text messages from colleagues, journalists, and even old law school classmates he hadn't spoken to in years. Someone had leaked the footage to a local news outlet within the hour. From there, it caught fire. Marcus sat stiffly in a windowless interview room at the Lakewood Police Department, sipping water from a paper cup while Captain Rivera made endless calls just outside the door. Through the thin walls, he could hear the frenzy. Phones ringing nonstop, officers whispering, the occasional raised voice. His abdomen throbbed with a dull, persistent ache. The doctor had confirmed no internal bleeding, but the bruising would take weeks to heal. The door creaked open, and Rivera stepped inside, her face drawn tight. "They're calling it a gross abuse of power," she said almost apologetically. "The Department of Justice has been notified. The FBI is sending agents." Marcus set down his cup carefully. "Good. It should be investigated thoroughly." Rivera nodded grimly. "The governor wants to speak with you personally. So does the mayor." He exhaled slowly. "I'm not interested in political photo opportunities." She rubbed her temple, looking uncomfortable. "They're panicking, sir. Terrified, really." This isn't going away. Marcus knew that already. He could feel the weight of it like a gavel he hadn't asked to wield. "I'm not here to ease their political concerns," he said quietly. Rivera didn't argue. Just then, a young officer knocked and poked his head in. "Captain, you need to see this." Rivera frowned and stepped outside. Marcus followed her into the main hallway. Mounted TVs above the reception desk blared local news. There it was, his face, close up, the pain evident in his eyes despite his composed expression. Beneath it, a banner in bold letters read, "Breaking. Federal judge assaulted by Lakewood police officer." The reporter's voice cut sharply through the static. "Civil rights organizations are already calling for criminal charges against Officer Derek Sullivan, who was suspended without pay earlier this afternoon." Marcus caught a glimpse of Sullivan being escorted out of the station, his face ashen, surrounded by a wall of silent, grim-faced officers. It didn't feel like victory. It didn't feel like anything but the beginning of something much larger. A woman from Internal Affairs, sharp-featured with intense eyes, introduced herself briskly to Marcus and handed over a copy of her preliminary report. It read exactly how he expected. Use of excessive force. Failure to verify identity. Failure to follow proper procedure. Violation of civil rights. "This will move quickly," she said. "Too much attention now." Marcus didn't bother smiling. Attention fades. Justice shouldn't. The woman gave him a rare nod of agreement as Marcus made his way to the parking lot. Later that evening, escorted by two plainclothes federal marshals, he paused on the steps of his apartment building. Across the street, a crowd had gathered, not protesters, not yet, but concerned citizens holding candles, some holding handwritten signs. "We stand with Judge Chen." An elderly Asian man broke from the group and approached, stopping a few feet away. "I just wanted to say," the man said, voice steady despite his age, "you're standing for all of us." Marcus felt his throat tighten unexpectedly. He nodded respectfully. "Thank you. We all must stand together." The man's eyes brightened with understanding, and he returned to the group across the street. Marcus stood there for a moment longer, letting the scene sink in. He hadn't asked for any of this. He hadn't sought attention or sympathy. He had just wanted to get to court on time and do his job. But sometimes, life hands you a fight you never asked for, and you either step up or you let it pass you by. Marcus Chen had never been the type to stand quietly on the sidelines. But the pressure was about to mount even higher as Marcus prepared to face a tidal wave of public reactions, apport, criticism, and everything in between. What no one yet realized was that Officer Sullivan's actions that day would uncover something far more sinister within the Lakewood Police Department, something that would shake the city to its core. By the next morning, Marcus's name was everywhere. Cable news anchors debated the incident like it was a championship match. Talk radio was flooded with callers, some outraged, others disturbingly defensive of Officer Sullivan's actions. Marcus sat at his desk in his modest apartment in downtown Lakewood, a cup of green tea cooling beside his laptop. The footage had been replayed so many times he could practically feel the blow before it happened. Emails poured in by the hundreds law students, civil rights advocates, fellow judges, even a retired teacher from Minnesota who wrote simply, "Your dignity in the face of injustice gives me hope." "Thank you." Marcus closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of every message. He hadn't set out to be a symbol, but now there was no escaping it. His phone buzzed again. It was an old colleague from his days at the Justice Department, Layla Cowrie, now a professor at Georgetown Law. Her voice was tight with controlled anger as soon as he answered. "Marcus, I saw the footage. I'm absolutely livid." He pressed the phone tighter to his ear. "I'm all right, Layla." "No, you're not," she said firmly. "None of us are." This shouldn't have happened, not to you, not to anyone. Marcus didn't argue. What could he say? That he'd somehow expected it? That being an Asian American man, even with robes and honors and years of service, never felt like enough protection outside those courthouse walls? Instead, he asked, "How are your students reacting?" Layla hesitated. "They're organizing. They want to protest, draft petitions. Some are already writing amicus briefs for cases that don't even exist yet." Marcus smiled faintly. It wasn't fear he felt. It was something sharper, something that felt dangerously close to hope. "Tell them to stay focused," he said. "Change comes through sustained pressure, not just outrage." After he hung up, Marcus turned on the television again. Outside the courthouse, people were gathering. Homemade signs waved above the crowd. Some faces were tear-streaked, others full of quiet, righteous fury. A young Asian American woman spoke into a microphone, her voice steady. "This is about accountability," she said. "About a system that protects some and punishes others based on who they are, not what they've done." Marcus leaned back in his chair, absorbing every word. This wasn't just his story anymore. Across town, there were rumors swirling that Sullivan had retained a high-profile defense attorney from Denver. Some TV pundits were already speculating whether he'd claim he felt threatened, the same tired excuse Marcus had seen trotted out in case after case that never got their proper justice. But there were too many witnesses this time, too much undeniable evidence. And maybe, just maybe, the country was ready for real accountability. Marcus's mind drifted to the crowd gathering in the crisp Colorado air. He pictured young faces holding signs, veterans standing tall, parents lifting children onto shoulders not because they knew him, but because they knew what he represented. Not a perfect system, not an instant victory, just the stubborn insistence that dignity belonged to everyone. The doorbell rang, snapping him out of his thoughts. 2 federal marshals stood there, looking serious but respectful. One of them, a compact woman with alert eyes, introduced herself as Deputy Marshal Ramirez. "Sir," she said professionally, "we're assigned to your security detail until further notice. Things are escalating quickly." Marcus appreciated the directness. He nodded. "Thank you, Marshal." Ramirez gave a small nod. "We've got your back, Your Honor. No one's getting near you." For the first time in 2 days, Marcus felt his shoulders relax slightly. He wasn't alone in this, not by a long shot. But as the legal wheels began turning faster behind the scenes, Marcus received a cryptic email from an anonymous sender. The subject line read simply, "Sullivan isn't the only one. Check case, LPD 2000 and 18426. Attached was a heavily redacted police report involving another officer from Sullivan's precinct. Marcus forwarded it to a trusted investigator at the DOJ. Something bigger was unfolding, something that went beyond one officer's violent mistake. The courtroom buzzed with a kind of energy Marcus hadn't felt in years, not excitement, not fear, something heavier, a demand for something most folks around Lakewood weren't used to seeing, real consequences. Marcus sat quietly in the gallery, flanked by 2 attorneys from the Judicial Council. He wasn't presiding today. He was a witness. At the defendant's table sat Derek Sullivan, looking hollow in a dark blue suit that seemed to swallow him. His attorney, a sharp-eyed man named James Whitfield, kept whispering urgently in his ear. The judge, a respected woman from Denver named Elaine Houghton, called the session to order. Prosecutors laid out the facts plainly. There was no need for embellishment. Video after video showed the same thing. Sullivan pulling Marcus over without cause, striking him in the abdomen, refusing to verify his identity, escalating a routine stop into violence. Marcus took the stand with measured steps. The courtroom held its breath as he placed his hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth. When the prosecutor asked him to describe what happened, he didn't embellish. He didn't dramatize. He told it plainly. "I was treated as less than human because of assumptions made the moment Officer Sullivan saw me," he said, his voice never wavering. "The credentials in my bag shouldn't be the reason anyone regrets mistreating me. My humanity should have been enough." "Somewhere in the back," someone murmured in agreement. Marcus glanced at Sullivan briefly during his testimony. The officer stared fixedly at the table. When it was time for the defense, James Whitfield tried hard to shift the narrative. Officer Sullivan perceived a potential threat, he said. He was responding to what he believed was suspicious behavior. Marcus's attorney stood immediately. Objection. Judge Houghton's gavel came down sharply. Sustained. Stick to facts, Mr. Whitfield. The defense sputtered, but there wasn't much to salvage. Too many witnesses, too much video, too much truth. When closing arguments wrapped, the judge didn't waste time. She found Derek Sullivan guilty of battery, abuse of authority, and violation of civil rights under color of law. Sentencing would come later, but the verdict was clear. As Marcus stepped outside into the bright afternoon light, cameras flashed and microphones thrust toward him. For a moment, he thought about ducking into the waiting car, about letting someone else speak for him. But then he thought about the elderly man with the candle, the doctor with her brother's story, the thousands of strangers who had written letters and posted signs. He stepped up to the bank of microphones. "My name is Judge Marcus Chen," he said clearly, "and what happened to me happens to too many people who don't have credentials or position to protect them." The reporters leaned closer. "I am grateful for the outpouring of support," he continued, "but gratitude is not enough. Justice isn't a privilege. It's not something you earn by being respectable or educated or prominent. It's a right. And until that right is guaranteed for everyone everywhere, none of us are truly free." He let the words hang there, heavier than the mountain air. No slogans, no theatrics, just the truth spoken plainly. Marcus turned and walked away without taking questions. The cameras kept rolling, but he didn't look back. Later that night at home, Marcus sat on his balcony, watching the city lights flicker against the mountain backdrop. His phone buzzed, again another message from someone he didn't know. A young man from Seattle. It read, "Because of you, I'm applying to law school. Thank you for standing firm when you could have walked away." Marcus smiled softly, setting the phone aside. He hadn't chosen this fight, but maybe it had chosen him for a reason. But the anonymous email still troubled him. The next morning, he made a call to an old friend at the FBI, Special Agent Diana Nguyen. "I need you to look into something," he said quietly. "I think Sullivan's case might be the tip of the iceberg." 3 days later, Agent Nguyen called back, her voice tense. "Marcus, you need to come in. What we found, it's bigger than we thought." Much bigger. She wouldn't say more over the phone, but Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. Sometimes justice wasn't just about one case. Sometimes it was about pulling a thread that unraveled an entire tapestry of corruption. When Marcus arrived at the FBI field office, Agent Nguyen led him to a secure conference room. Spread across the table were dozens of case files, all involving the same police precinct. Sullivan was part of a unit with an unusually high number of excessive force complaints. She explained, her voice clinical but her eyes burning. Most were dismissed, buried, or settled quietly. But when we started digging, she pushed forward a thick folder. We found a pattern. Asian Americans, Latinos, Black citizens all subjected to similar treatment. All cases mysteriously disappeared from the record. Marcus felt his stomach tighten. How far up does this go? Agent Nguyen's face was grim. All the way to the deputy chief. Maybe higher. Marcus sat back, the weight of it settling over him. What had begun as one officer's violent mistake was revealing itself to be a systemic cancer. And somehow, he was now at the center of exposing it all. "What happens now?" he asked quietly. Agent Nguyen's smile was thin but determined. Now we build a RICO case. And you, Judge Chen, are our star witness." The weeks that followed were a blur of grand jury testimony, evidence review, and increased security as threats began pouring in. Marcus received protection from the Marshal Service around the clock. His routine court duties were temporarily reassigned. His life had been upended completely, but he never once considered backing down. 6 weeks after the initial incident, the U.S. Attorney for Colorado held a press conference that shook the state. 15 officers, 2 sergeants, a lieutenant, and the deputy chief of police were indicted on charges ranging from civil rights violations to conspiracy to obstruction of justice. At the center of it all was case LPD 2018-426, the death of a young Vietnamese man in police custody that had been covered up for years. As Marcus watched the announcement from his office, he thought about how a single moment of injustice, captured on camera, had cracked open a door that many had tried desperately to keep shut. He thought about the anonymous whistleblower who had trusted him with the truth. He thought about Dr. Okafor's brother and countless others who had never received justice. Months later, Marcus stood at the steps of the federal courthouse in Denver, his robe billowing gently around his ankles. He had agreed reluctantly to give a speech at a ceremony honoring the passage of the Colorado Police Accountability Act legislation that had been stalled for years until the Sullivan case and subsequent investigation created unstoppable momentum. He didn't think he deserved to be celebrated. He had only done what any person with integrity would have done. Still, as he looked out over the diverse crowd, students, community leaders, families with children perched on shoulders, she felt something he hadn't allowed himself to feel since that awful morning at the hospital entrance. Purpose. Marcus adjusted the microphone and began. "I've been a judge for many years," he said, voice steady. "And one thing I know for certain is that justice doesn't live in marble buildings or flow automatically from robes and gavels." He paused, letting the silence settle around him. "Justice lives in the courage of ordinary people who refuse to look away. It lives in the moments when we choose truth over comfort, when we choose to see each other fully, not as stereotypes, not as threats, but as human beings worthy of dignity." A soft murmur of agreement drifted through the crowd. He smiled faintly, not the kind of smile meant for cameras, but something real, something earned. "I didn't survive that traffic stop because of my position," he said. "I survived because countless others before me refused to let their stories die in silence." A young girl in the front row, maybe 12 years old, leaned forward, hanging on to every word. Marcus's heart lifted slightly at the sight. "I won't pretend our system changed overnight because of what happened to me. It didn't. Real change moves slowly. It stumbles. It gets pushed back. But it keeps moving forward if we push with it." Marcus caught the eye of Dr. Okafor standing off to the side, her brother beside her, both nodding in solemn agreement. "I don't stand here today because I'm special," Marcus said, voice firm. "I stand here because when the moment came to speak truth, I chose not to be silent." He leaned forward slightly, lowering his voice without losing an ounce of strength. "And you," he said, scanning the crowd, "have that same choice every single day." The young girl beamed at him, her whole face lighting up with possibility. Marcus finished. "Choose courage. Choose truth. Choose to stand even when it's easier to sit, because when you do, you give permission for others to stand too." The applause was gentle at first, then swelled naturally. Without prompting, Marcus stepped back from the microphone and let the crowd have their moment. After the ceremony, people lined up to shake his hand. Some cried, some laughed, some simply pressed their palms to their hearts in silent solidarity. Marcus stayed until the very last one had gone. As the sun dipped low behind the Rocky Mountains, painting the sky in deep purples and fiery oranges, he gathered his things and walked slowly toward the parking lot. His Hyundai waited for him, the same modest one from before. No fanfare, just him, a set of keys, and the road ahead. He slipped behind the wheel, took a long, steadying breath, and smiled to himself. Not because the fight was over, it was far from over, but because he knew he was exactly where he was supposed to be. And this time, he wasn't driving alone, not really. Across the state, across the country, people had heard his story, and maybe, just maybe, they would carry a little more courage, a little more resolve into their own lives. Marcus Chen didn't need accolades or headlines. He needed change, real, stubborn, everyday change. And he was ready to keep fighting for it, however long it took. As he drove home, his phone buzzed with a text from Agent Nguyen. 3 more whistleblowers came forward today. This is just the beginning." He smiled. Sometimes justice starts with a single moment of truth that refuses to be silenced. If you believe in standing for dignity, respect, and accountability, even when it's hard, don't stay silent. Be someone's reason to hope. Share this story. Let's keep moving forward together.